Yoru is the future. Let me explain why. So, for those of you who don't know, there are kind of two types of duelists in the game of Valorant. There is the movement duelist, whose primary abilities are about movement, and it's about closing the gap or extending the gap if you need to get away from a bad fight, and that's what the movement duelists do. And then there's kind of the other kind of duelists, which I'm going to call the kind of fight-based duelists, who primarily work through flashes, or if it's ISO with a shield, and they're good at taking fights. That's kind of what they're meant to do. Then there's Yoru. And Yoru kind of sits somewhere in the middle of these duelists, where he does have a movement ability. He can teleport across the map, but at times it can be a little bit clunky. But he also has flashes and some kind of initiation tools to help him take fights as well. And so he can do that on his own better than perhaps the movement duelists can. And so Yoru has kind of sat in this weird space in the game where sometimes it can be difficult to find perhaps a good slot for Yoru. But I think in the course of this season, we've kind of found where you want to play a Yoru. And that is in this kind of comp. The Apex are playing here on Ascent. And this is a comp that you might recognize, or you might recognize the bones of it, in Fnatic's Haven comp as well. Now, it's not the exact same. Here, Apex are playing a Deadlock instead of the ISO that Fnatic were playing on Haven. But the bare bones of it are pretty similar. You've got a Cypher, Yoru, Sova, Omen, plus one more. And this is the crucial thing about this kind of comp. Because when you play Cypher, Yoru, Sova, it could be a Fade as well, by the way, and an Omen, plus one, these four agents just on their own kind of have everything you need for a comp, right? We need Sentinel utility, got it. We need a movement duelist, got it. We need some flashes, got it. We need, some recon abilities, got it. We need potentially some extra initiation as well. Well, Yoru can help out with that, Omen can help out with that. Cypher can help out with that a bit as well, and Omen can also help with a lack of movement potentially if you don't just like the Yoru movement. So it kind of, you have everything here that one comp might need, and that means that you essentially have a free agent to pick, right? So for Fnatic, that was ISO. Here for Apex, it's Deadlock. And these flex slot agents can be used to find a lot of value. We saw Althea dominate on the ISO on Haven.
Oh my god, a missed shot. Oh, 1v1 by Ed. Have fun. And they're still going to be stalled out on the side. Both still at the back of the side. Oh, the judge, he had to dive forward with that as well. This is all topsy-turvy. It's all going a bit wonky. But it's a 3v4. And they still need to work towards the site. 45 seconds here. Spike quickly back in hand, but Alpha going to be controlling towards B. The right place at the right time. And he's got two potential targets. And he is just styling on them right now. Alpha deadly as ever.
And we also saw some really nice rounds from Apex as well, using the Deadlock and finding some value from it.
Safety, he's going to get revealed. He is being closed in on. Has the support from the back of the boathouse, but if this tournament has taught me anything, is that player is going to be dead within seconds. Hype gets aggressive, turns things into an even scenario. Element still fighting, but Soulcast.
And this is why I really do believe that this could be the future. And so really there's only two things to me that are limiting this idea from really becoming the future, and potentially this idea could be strong enough to be meta everywhere, and I'll get into that in just a second. But what are the two limiting factors? Well, one is that most duelist players aren't that good at Yoru. That's the kind of first thing, that most duelist players who are pro players haven't played a ton of Yoru in the past and probably don't know how to play the agent, and Yoru is quite a complex agent to play pretty well, and so that is a pretty big limiting factor. However, I think that in this past VCT season we saw the rise of Neon, and there was probably a lot of duelist players who hadn't played that much Neon before previously either, but still took on the Neon and actually did pretty well with the Neon. Kang, I think, is perhaps the ultimate example of this, where his Neon looked really, really good, and they won the Champs Grand Final somewhat off the back of him playing Neon. And so perhaps there is some hope then that if Yoru ever did become somewhat meta, that then we would see, more people picking up Yoru. And this season alone, we did see quite a bit more Yoru than we ever have done before. But the second limiting factor is really the big one, which will determine whether this will be the future of the game or not. And that is there an agent worth playing in that flex role? Because here's the thing, that flex role, I did say it could be any agent, but in reality, it needs to be a certain type of agent as well. It needs to be a certain type of agent, like a duelist that isn't a movement duelist, or like a deadlock, a barrier sentinel. An agent that perhaps isn't necessary in a comp, but it also needs to be extremely strong. And so that is kind of the catch-22 of this situation. You both need an agent that is very, very strong, but also an agent that is not necessary in a pro team comp, which is a bit of a dilemma and perhaps is unlikely to happen, some of you might say, but it kind of was on the way to happening earlier this season with ISO, right? When we had the kind of pre-nerfed ISO version of him, there was a lot of teams that were experimenting with that, and obviously Fnatic, even after the nerf, carried on with the ISO idea and was still finding a lot of success with it. And so I do think that that is a potential that in the future, obviously we don't know what agents will come out in the future, but I think it's possible that Riot one day will release an agent who isn't necessary for a team comp, but is also very strong. Some of you will be thinking about Vice already and wondering if Vice fits this role, and Vice is perhaps on the right kind of lines. Perhaps one, I don't think is quite strong enough to justify this, and two, perhaps just doesn't quite have the right role because you also have a flash. You know, you do have the barrier for potential as well, but maybe could fit into this kind of comp. But I do think that in the future, it is possible we will see some kind of agent that is strong enough to warrant doing this, and that then this will kind of become the shell of the comp that starts to become meta. And again, when you're thinking about ideas like this, like Fnatic's Haven comp, you could literally copy paste that comp onto a lot of different maps, right? And that's why I kind of want to bring up this idea, because it's not just about being meta on one map. If ISO truly was that strong that you had to play that agent on every map, right? If you're thinking like, you know, old chamber levels of agent strong, right? That you must play this agent as much as you can. If we get that kind of agent in the future that fits that kind of role, then this would be the meta almost everywhere, right? This is what would just become the meta almost everywhere, because you need to fit that agent in, and this is the shell that really would allow you to do that. And so how likely is this idea to happen? Well, I think if Riot just keeps adding agent after agent, I feel like it has to happen at some point, that eventually they're gonna release an agent that is both very, very good and also doesn't fit the traditional kind of roles. And in fact, that's maybe the kind of thing that Riot would want to do anyway, right? Maybe Riot would want to shake up the pro meta by saying, hey, here's a barrier sentinel who's really, really strong, or hey, here's a non-movement duelist that is really, really good, right? That could potentially be something that they're looking to do, to potentially explore different ideas of what a pro meta might look like. And if that ever does happen, well then Yoru will be everywhere.